Hey Marek, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you, and I'm so excited to talk about Celo. But before we do that, I would love to learn a little bit more about who we're speaking with, and I assume so do the audience. So if you want, please give us a quick background.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Marek Olszewski. I'm one of the co-founders of Celo and now Self Protocol as well. I have a technical background. I studied computer science way back when at the University of Toronto, and then I went to MIT for my PhD. And that's where I met Renee, my co-founder at Celo and Self. He was doing his MBA while I was doing my PhD. And yeah, out of MIT, we started a company called Loku back in 2011. That company did well, got acquired a few years later. And, we teamed up again for our subsequent runs in crypto ever since.
All right. And what was the entryway for you in crypto or Web3?
Yeah, great question. So, in at MIT, I was studying. I was in the compiler team, but I was focused on parallel systems, automatic parallelization, as well as making things run deterministically. Things that are all very relevant to crypto, certainly to blockchains. Um, and so I've always been following the space. But my first entry into crypto was at a music festival in 2013. I bumped into Brian Armstrong at Outside Lands, and he sent me, I think, $5 worth of Bitcoin on Coinbase. I'm still holding that, and yeah, that was my first, I think, time to really start holding crypto.
I
Yeah, I
love
guess I guess that's a lot more right now. So like you.
It has gone up since then, and yeah, definitely definitely grateful, not just for for the Bitcoin, but also for kind of getting me crypto pilled in the space.
Yeah, I love hearing those stories of how everyone made it, like got into crypto. Typically, it's so diverse and so different. All right, let's talk about Celo. And I imagine we could devote an entire episode on discussing what is Celo. But if you were to pitch it, really quickly to us as well as to everyone listening, how would you describe it? Like, what is Celo?
Yeah, so Celo is an L2 focused really on real world use cases. So think P2P payments, think commerce, think uncollateralized lending. A lot of the non-casino like use cases of crypto that you probably have heard of or thought about. We're just laser focused on these use cases on Celo. And we're very lucky to have partnered with Opera, the browser company. Maybe you've used one of their browsers on your desktop or mobile. Especially on desktop, they were very popular back in the day. They've launched MiniPay, which is just a really incredible take on global Venmo. It's really normie focused. They abstract away addresses. They used a lot of similar features that make it possible to pay for gas with tokens, and so it's a stablecoin only wallet. And they've seen a lot of growth with normies in emerging markets, and so we're a lot of our focus is on helping them effectively become global Venmo. They're a big public company. They have 9 million users already using MiniPay, and so we're I think pretty bullish on them actually being the first to get to global Venmo. And they have a nice mini app experience. And so we're also working with a lot of folks in the broader ecosystem to bring mini apps to those 9 million users globally that, again, are focused more on kind of these real world use cases, less casino like use cases. And so, yeah, that's our focus right now. And yeah, it's been going really well. And we're just really excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, so global Venmo seems great, and we will come back to it. But would you say you guys, as a seller, right, you're focused on any specific region, right, or like a segment, right, of a world right now, or not really?
Definitely emerging markets. So I think, it's definitely the case that in developed nations, crypto is not that interesting for some of these more real world use cases because, for example, in the US, you already have Venmo, right? So um, having a crypto-based Venmo for people in the US doesn't really give people like a 10x improvement over what they have today. And so they're not really likely to switch to it. But if you go to markets where things like Venmo don't exist, then that's where we're seeing a lot of traction. Right now, a lot of our traction has been in the African continent, but we are expanding. MiniPay has invested heavily into on and off ramps in the African continent, as well as the broader Celo ecosystem and various Celo ecosystem funds. But now we're actually replicating that success in other geos, and so expect MiniPay to really take off in other regions as well. But again, emerging market regions, because I think that's where the need is. That's where it's easy to onboard people because the utility that you provide is just so much greater than what they have access to today. But the goal is still to become global Venmo, right? And that means having everyone in the world use Celo and MiniPay. But I think the way to get there is by focusing on emerging markets and then using network effects to pull in the rest of the world. And so I think WhatsApp is a really big inspiration for us. WhatsApp started and primarily in emerging markets where the cost of a text message was just too prohibitive. And only later, because people communicate globally and because network effects are really powerful, only later did a lot of developed countries come on board. And so I think that we expect the same to happen for global Venmo as well.
Yeah, I like the way of thinking on how to approach the market in areas where what I'm offering would 10x the user experience on something in particular. And I wish more people, especially in crypto, thought like that and kind of like expanded their horizon more in developing countries. All right, I want to talk more about that and stablecoin payments and MiniPay as well. But before we dive more into those specific, I want to take a step back and talk about something much broader and a little bit more technical. So there's no reason or no way we have this conversation without talking about your journey from being an L1 to an L2. So, you launched in 2020, you proposed to, or there was a proposal to move to an L2 in 2023, and then you eventually launched L2 in this March, like March of 2025, if I remember correctly. So I want you to walk us through that journey. What made why you decided to migrate from an L1 to an L2. Briefly talk to us. I remember you had a framework to make that decision. It wasn't just you didn't make it on a whim, and you ultimately landed on OP Stack. So I want you to talk about the entire thing if you want to.
Yeah, great question. So when we initially started by just focusing on the wallet experience. So we started in late 2017, early 2018. We started by building what we thought would be like a global Venmo on top of Ethereum. And so we were very excited about Ethereum. We were totally Ethereum pilled, building on top of Ethereum. But it was also around then when CryptoKitties exploded and gas prices on Ethereum just became I think for the first time, like too expensive for something like a global Venmo use case. And so it became really evident to us that if we wanted to really succeed in bringing something that normies could use, we needed to invest in a new chain that was more scalable, but also had some of the product features that we needed to make the experience easy enough for normies. So we invested in this native way of being able to pay for gas with tokens, and then into Social Connect, now Self Connect, which was a protocol that let you use phone numbers as identifiers instead of public key derived addresses. And so we invested heavily in this network. Ultimately, that became Celo. Meanwhile, we still worked on the wallet at the same time. That became Valora. And, at the time, there was no L2-centric scaling roadmap. There was no way to do what we wanted to do in the Ethereum ecosystem without launching our own kind of alt L1. If there was, we would have just launched as an L2 back then, because again, our origins were in Ethereum. We were excited about Ethereum, and we were primarily building Celo in this way, not because we wanted to become an Ethereum killer, but because we wanted to build a very specific use case that we thought was really exciting and needed. Fast forward to a few years ago, the L2-centric roadmap was in full swing. It became clear that it was possible for us to continue doing what we wanted to do while still being aligned with the rest of Ethereum. And so that's ultimately what got us thinking about making this transition. And I will say that we probably underestimated the amount of work that it would take. But needless to say, we were excited about the prospect. And so we threw up a governance proposal to see what the community thought of the idea. And I think it was very nerve-wracking. It's one of these things that once you put it out there, it's hard to take back. And we had no idea how people would react. And so, we took this leap of faith. And, at the time, nobody else really had done it, let alone, or nobody else was even talking about it, let alone had actually done something like this. And so it was very, very nerve-wracking. But we took that leap of faith. We put that governance proposal up, and the entire community was actually very much in favor of it. And so that was really amazing to see. And then the Ethereum community was also very, very excited about it and very welcoming. And that, definitely gave us the confidence that this was, the right direction. And then we worked on the Herculean effort of actually making this migration. And I say it was a lot of work because again we were the first to do it, and so there was no playbook, and there was just a lot to figure out. And there was a lot of competition from L2 stacks. So we were instantly inundated with pitches from all the different L2 stacks saying, "Hey, you should use us." And at first we thought, okay, maybe we should build our own stack, but we realized that if we wanted to contribute to Ethereum, make Ethereum better, I think there was already a lot of L2 stack fragmentation, and so we thought, okay, this isn't probably going to be the right way for us to contribute. And so we got aligned around the idea of adopting an existing stack. And we did go through, I would say, fairly rigorous evaluation process, in part because we have on-chain governance, and a lot of these different L2 protocols went to our governance and said, hey, like, you should adopt us. Here's a proposal. And then naturally governance was like, okay, we can't evaluate all these. C Labs, can you help out? And so C Labs was like, sure, we can do it. But this will take some effort, and so we tried to do it the right way, and we did come up with like a very detailed checklist of everything that was important to us, time to market, and just alignment with the ecosystems using those stacks was high up on the list, but there were other important factors as well. Obviously, security, decentralization, all of these different pieces. After going through this whole exercise, we did end up picking OP Stack, and we were very, very happy that we did. We think that it certainly was the stack. To this day, we think we wouldn't have been able to make this transition in the schedule that we were able to if we picked another stack. I think it would have just been a lot more work. And so from that perspective, it was certainly a great choice. And I think in general, I think it's just become a better and better choice as more and more companies and projects have launched L2s using OP Stack, and as the kind of super chain has kind of evolved. And so we're pretty happy to have bet on the right horse, so to speak, because I think it's definitely giving us tailwinds now. And yeah, we did the migration in March. A lot of the effort was around making sure that there was very minimal disruption to the broader ecosystem. We called it a hard fork. It was just a hard fork, but certainly it was harder than your typical hard fork, primarily for node operators. Node operators had to switch clients. They had to migrate their chain data at the point of the hard fork, rather than modifying OP Stack and putting a lot of code into it that would enable it to sync from Genesis through all of Celo's hard forks in the past and all of Celo's prior features. We wanted to minimize the diff between us and vanilla OP Stack, and so we instead opted to migrate the chain data into a format that then the new client could understand without having modifications for it. And so a lot of work went into making sure that was a smooth process, that was trustworthy, that it was decentralized, a refill node could do it themselves, that folks didn't have to rely on some snapshot that C Labs would issue. And it worked great. We had a hard fork viewing party. Vitalik was gracious enough to come and speak. He counted down in Esperanto down to the exact moment of the hard fork. And it was a big celebration when the transition happened. And it went off without a hitch. I was very nervous during that hard fork viewing party. Vitalik was there, but I was on stage with him sweating. But there wasn't ultimately no reason to stress, because all of the hard work that we did leading up to it paid off, and all the dry runs, everything resulted in just a very smooth experience. I think there was a product manager, Medha, over at Uniswap that put out a really glowing tweet just saying how smooth the process was for Uniswap. Ultimately, they didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to upgrade their contracts. They didn't have to switch providers for their RPC or for their indexers. All of the downstream services that they relied on did most of the heavy lifting, and ultimately they just had to sit back and relax, and everything just worked. And so that was just an amazing testimonial, that just validated the approach and just all of the hard work that went into the upgrade.
Yeah, amazing and long journey, and I'm happy that it, you came out of that in a successful way. I want to ask just a quick follow-up before getting into slightly even more technical stuff. But you mentioned that in order to do the migration, also in the timeline that you had in mind, like OP Stack was the one that that you could really do it with. And I want to ask why. Like, was it the support that was existent? Was it technical reasons? Was it something else?
Yeah. So, I think primarily the fact that they weren't ZK based meant that, to port some of Celo's features, we wouldn't have to write, hand assembly to using these assembly languages that some of these ZK EVMs use for writing the ZK EVM itself. We wouldn't have to write those extensions that exist in Celo in those assembly languages. So that's, I think, probably one of the main reasons that OP Stack beat out the ZK EVMs. I mentioned that MiniPay lets you pay for gas with tokens, primarily stablecoins, because they're a stablecoin only focused wallet. This is something that we've had support for in Celo since 2020, and we needed to port this to the new client so that wallets like MiniPay wouldn't have any impact with the migration. And so we had to port these features over. There's a few other smaller features that we had to port over to, and just being able to do it without having to write handwritten assembly was just a major benefit. And we had this hypothesis that we didn't have to write that handwritten assembly because proving systems were getting faster and faster, and that eventually systems like RISC-0 and Succinct would become efficient enough that we'd be able to become a ZK EVM even without having to go through that effort. And obviously, fast forward to today, and the hypothesis has played out hugely. And we started talking to folks like RISC-0 and Succinct in earnest at the end of last year, and we're excited about all the progress that they made, and we started collaborating on transitioning Celo into a ZK EVM. And so earlier this year at ECC, we launched Eclair, which is our first ZK EVM kind of testnet that we built in partnership with both EigenDA and Succinct. So we're using EigenDA v2 and Succinct to allow proving of the whole derivation pipeline, including the whole Alt-DA piece, which was it's a pretty big undertaking, but it's live, it's running in testnet, and we're gearing up to bring it to production before the end of the year.
Yeah. So you mentioned Alt-DA. And that's my another question, actually, because you talked about Ethereum alignment, right? But also you guys decided to use EigenDA instead of blobs, and also instead of other solutions like Celestia, Veil, and so on. So could you tell me what was standing behind this decision?
Yeah. So if you go back to when we made the proposal to transition Celo to become an L2, that was before proto-dank sharding had gone live, and it was at a time when we were thinking long and hard how we could make this transition without impacting our users who are using things like MiniPay in emerging markets where they're very gas fee sensitive. So we knew that it didn't make sense to transition to become an L2 if it meant 10xing or 100xing our fees, because if we had done that, then we would just effectively undermine our whole go-to-market and effectively lose all of our existing users. And so one reason that we were excited to make the proposal to become an L2 was because at the time that we did was because we felt that with the launch of EigenDA, or with the imminent launch of EigenDA, I should say, because it hadn't been live yet, there was finally a way for us to become an L2 in a way that was Ethereum aligned, that didn't raise our gas fees. And so that, in a way, EigenDA was kind of this missing piece that really enabled us to make this transition. And there were other options, and there were other people, in the community, pushing for, Celestia and other options. And to their credit, these other folks, I think, helped bring this whole conversation to the forefront. But at the end of the day, we felt that if we're going to make this very, very big effort to transition to becoming L2, we wanted to do it in a way that was as Ethereum aligned as possible. And the nice thing about EigenDA is because it doesn't have its own chain, ultimately, EigenDA is not really a competitor to Ethereum the way that something like Celestia is. And so we thought that that would be the best choice for us. We needed low transaction fees, and we wanted to be as Ethereum aligned as possible. And if you have those two constraints, then EigenDA is the perfect solution for you.
Okay, I want to go back into pull us back a little bit from the more technical things and go back to more consumer facing if you want. And I want to get more into MiniPay. We briefly mentioned it and briefly gave an overview of it at the start. And I want to get and dig a little bit deeper. So could you do us the favor of, again, explaining what MiniPay is, but also, in the broader scope of Celo and what you want to achieve with MiniPay, and whether it's a standalone app, let's say, or is it the foundation for something bigger? So yeah, let's learn more about MiniPay.
Yeah, great question. So MiniPay is, once again, it's not an effort by us. It's an effort by Opera. Opera is a kind of public company that's been around for 30 years. They most famously have a suite of really amazing browsers from desktop to mobile. And, MiniPay is their effort at really, trying to crack this global Venmo kind of nut, so to speak. And, we had been talking to them and working together on this for a long time. I think they were excited about, how much we've thought about this for so long, and about how good of a platform Celo was for delivering on this. And, we were obviously excited by their amazing product expertise and their amazing mobile expertise, and also their, just massive existing user base. I think they have over 500 million monthly active users across all their different products. And so they launched MiniPay initially inside Opera Mini, which is one of their mobile browsers that has, I think, 500 million installs globally. And so MiniPay initially was embedded inside this browser. And that was a great way for them to onboard a lot of users. And what it is it's effectively looks and feels just like Venmo. You have a balance that's kind of shown to you in your local currency. And then you can custody only 3 assets, USDT, USDC, and CUSD. And because on Celo you can pay for gas natively with these tokens, you don't need ETH, you don't need Celo to be able to pay for transaction fees, and so the wallet doesn't even hold those, because again they're targeting normies, and And for normies, I think stablecoins are just so much simpler. And then they're using a protocol called Self-Connect that lets you map phone numbers to wallet addresses. And so the whole send experience when you're sending money to someone is you're searching through your contact list, finding a phone number, and then using that phone number, the wallet can find the wallet address that you're sending to, but it doesn't disclose that wallet address to the user. So everything is just phone number based. And they have a very delightful send flow experience that again feels like a fintech Web2 product like Revolut or like Venmo, and people have started using this for P2P payments in their local countries, but also for remittances. I think I came across recently this Y Combinator founder on Twitter who was tweeting that he was talking to his Uber drivers in I think Dallas, and he was saying that they're all using MiniPay to send money back home to Burkina Faso, and they found that it was the cheapest way to do so. And I think U.S. to Burkina Faso is probably the biggest, I would imagine, remittance corridor to that country. But what we've also heard is that if you go to very bespoke corridors, like for example, we heard of another interesting case study. A yoga instructor in Malawi had clients in Norway who were paying him. He found that MiniPay was, I think, 40% cheaper than something like MoneyGram. And that's a very bespoke remittance corridor. And so it just makes sense that a lot of the big existing established players are not going to be able to service that particularly cheaply. And so we're seeing, people using MiniPay for P2P payments locally, but we're also seeing them using it to send funds overseas. And it's been kind of growing ever since. So they started off inside Opera Mini. Eventually, they realized that it would be nice to have a standalone app as well, and so they launched a standalone Android app as well as a standalone iOS app, and their usage has just kind of grown. More recently, they also added mini dApps, and so they have now quite a lot of users, and a lot of crypto builders are probably excited about, or we hear from crypto builders that they're excited about building for these users, right? Distribution is really, really hard in crypto. And so Opera added this mini app experience. And what's interesting is it's a little different than most mini apps in that these all have to work with stablecoins, right? You have to pay for gas with stablecoins. You have to deposit money into the dApp with stablecoins. And I think that just makes it all the more easy for these end users. Everything just feels pretty simple. Again, there's no super volatile currency that they have to think about. Everything just operates in stablecoins. And we're seeing some pretty cool mini apps now take off. I think one that's quite popular is Mdundo. It's kind of the Spotify of Africa. So it's a music streaming site. You can subscribe to it just like folks subscribe to Spotify, and it has a lot of African artists on it that use it for distribution, and they primarily take payments using mobile money, which is popular throughout the African continent. But mobile money can charge upwards of 30%. If there's a company using it to receive payments in this way. And so they were really excited about the prospect of not having to pay that 30%. And so they created a mini app inside MiniPay. And now people are using it to listen to music. And then they pay for the subscription monthly using stablecoins in their self-custodial wallet. And so It's pretty exciting. I think definitely a glimpse of the future. And it's already happening today, and it's just such a great experience.
All right, and not like it seems like a big aspect of Celo is stablecoins, and the biggest I think by TVL protocol on Celo, Mento, is also like a stablecoin issuer. So I'm really curious on your take on stablecoins in general, and like the more recent like stablecoin revival, if you want to put it that way, where a lot of the on-chain TVL is stablecoins, and it's an valid, like real world use case that's besides speculation or anything, as you also explained with the Dallas, Burkina Faso, or Norway to South Africa or wherever it was, corridors. So yeah, like what is your stance on stablecoins on Celo?
Yeah, I mean, I think stablecoins create a lot of real world utility for a lot of people. I think they are denominated in a unit of account that a lot of people are comfortable with. In the case of MiniPay, it is primarily US dollar stablecoins right now, and so one of the value propositions that maybe I should have mentioned earlier for MiniPay is just to have a dollar saving wallet. For a lot of people, even without sending money to their friends or using it for remittances, it's just useful to have exposure to an easy way to save in dollars. And so a lot of people are using MiniPay in that way as well. But we do, foresee a world where not just, US dollar stablecoins, but stablecoins pegged to every currency in the world will become popular on chain. And Mento is chasing that future. Mento right now has, I think, 15 or so stablecoins pegged to different currencies around the world. And they have a really cool DEX that lets you trade between these. And so they're bringing effectively on-chain FX, or they're bringing FX on-chain effectively. And it's a growing and big market. I think the FX market in TradFi is like ungodly big, like trillions and trillions of dollars. I think in like, I don't know if it's weekly or even less than that, get traded in these FX markets, and Mento is effectively working towards bringing that on chain. And I think there's a lot of value in doing so. I think there's more interesting, I think, kind of leverage products that can be built on chain, more ways to compose different positions that you may have as you try to hedge currency risk. A lot of really interesting things that you can do that are completely novel in crypto. But also, it just gives people more exposure to these products. If you don't have, like a great brokerage account in the US, you may not even have exposure to some of these FX futures or forward contracts that you may want to buy in order to hedge currency risk for whatever need that you may have. Maybe you're a business that's doing trade and you need to buy parts to build something and then sell it in a different market, and in the time that it takes for you to buy those parts, ship them, build something, and then ship your final product out, you may undergo, you may see big swings in FX rates, which can impact you negatively, right? So the standard solution here is to just hedge that currency risk. And big companies are really good at that, but smaller companies throughout the world, or even big companies in emerging markets, don't have the same access to these types of financial instruments that many big companies in developed markets take for granted. And so Mento is just crushing it on this front. I think they have hundreds of millions of daily DEX volume. hundreds of millions of dollars of volume daily on this FX DEX, and I think this is just growing, and I think it's going to be just a really big use case on top of crypto going forward.
Yeah, I will agree. On-chain finance and stablecoins are providing a lot of benefits to both users and services, integrating them. But there is one big unsolved blockchain problem that I see, and that's civil protection. So do you have any answer for that, for Celo, actually?
Yes. It's almost as if you're following my tweets. So I mentioned at the start that I'm a co-founder of Self Protocol as well. Self Protocol is a new ZK passport identity protocol. I think if you think about what it will take to get to global Venmo, it's clear that you need to onboard a lot of people, right? Effectively everyone. And it's clear that you'll need to do so in a way that can reward people or incentivize people to get onboarded, even if they don't have capital to bring and put the risk in crypto dApps, right? I think crypto has been really good historically at onboarding people who have money, right? There's a lot of incentive schemes that reward you if you have money. Proof of work initially you needed to buy the electricity. Proof of stake, you needed to stake something. DeFi summary, you needed to put some capital into a protocol. All of these systems rewarded people handsomely if they had money to bring into the ecosystem. And we're starting to reach a point where, we want to start onboarding, the next few billion people who may have a lot of value, that may benefit hugely from Web3 products, but may not have the capital to bring in order to be incentivized to come on chain. And so I think this means you need to onboard people without them bringing capital. The nice thing about incentivizing people who have capital is that it's a natural Sybil resistance mechanism, right? Ultimately, this is why proof of work and proof of stake work. And so if you're not going to have capital, you need something else. And Self Protocol leverages the existing kind of decentralized identity systems that exist today. Initially starting with passports, but we've since added EU ID support, and we're adding more national IDs going forward. Any ID system that has baked-in cryptography used to prevent forgeries, we can, in effect, bring on-chain through ZK proofs. So you may have noticed on your passport, nowadays you have this rectangular logo with a circle in the middle of it. That means that your passport's a biometric passport. What that means is there's a NFC chip embedded in one of your pages of your passport. And the NFC chip has all of the data that exists on the main page of your passport. It's all stored there digitally. And more importantly, it's cryptographically signed by a chain of signatures leading up to a country-wide certificate authority. And so if you have the public keys of all of these certificate authorities across all the different countries in the world, then you can verify the authenticity of anyone's passport. And so this was done to prevent forgeries, so that when you enter a country, immigration can make sure that you didn't, fake this passport. But you can also use this for bringing identity on chain. Because critically, you can verify those signatures without a counterparty in a smart contract. So you can actually verify that you have a valid passport without having to show your passport data to any other third party. You can just let a smart contract do the verification. Now, of course, if you did that in plain text, you'd be revealing your information to everyone in the world. So you don't want to do that. But what you can do, and what Self does, is it effectively checks those signatures in zero knowledge, which allows you to effectively create a ZK proof that you have a valid passport that was signed by one of these, known country certificate authorities. And so that's how Self works. And what you can do with this is pretty amazing. You can use this to let people prove that they're a unique individual. So you can use this for Sybil resistance, which is amazing for onboarding. You can incentivize people, to come into your DApp without them having to bring any money, and you can give them a reward, and you can know that you won't be Sybil attacked by your users, because people can only generate this proof once. But you can do actually so much more than that. You can prove that you can subsequently make arbitrary statements, prove arbitrary statements about yourself that can be derived from your passport data or from your national ID. So, for example, you could prove that you're over a certain age or that you're under a certain age. A lot of dating sites that we're talking to care about proving that you're under a certain age. You can prove, what country you're from, what set of countries you're not from. You can even prove that you're not on the OFAC list. And you can do this without revealing anything about yourself beyond this statement. And so that's really, really powerful. There's just a lot of both Web 2 and Web 3 use cases. And we launched this earlier this year at ETH Denver. And, we've gotten a lot of interest. So I think most famously, Google Cloud is using this, or announced that they're working to use this for 3 really cool new products. Velodrome announced that they are going to use this for boosted rewards for real humans. So if you do a proof that you're a unique individual, you can earn additional yield farming rewards when you provide capital to a Velodrome pool. Today, Aave will announce that they're launching boosted rewards for unique humans for their pools. And so that's super exciting. And, I think there's just a lot of really, really interesting use cases. Again, both Web 3 and Web 2, they get unlocked because of this technology.
Are there any plans to do more of these kinds of integrations on Celo, like directly, either financial, like stablecoin payments or whatever, or like identity, or even on and off ramps?
Or maybe you guys want to have one super app and kind of follow like WorldCoin with WordApp. So what's the plan?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly, I think Opera has ambitions to become, like a super app-like app, and we're supporting them in any way we can to help get there. Self's ambitions are a little different. We don't want Self to have its own wallet and compete with World the way that World has everything, vertically integrated from their chain all the way through to their app. We want Self to be a public good for all of Ethereum, so that anyone on any chain can verify these proofs. The registry still lives on Celo, and the token will live on Celo, and so it's still valuable for Celo. But we think that it's more interesting for Self to be something that is used broadly across all of Ethereum, and frankly, even all of crypto and even Web 2. And so we're building it in that way. And we also don't care about owning the user for Self. We instead, or at least through some sort of interface, we care about the protocol having the most registered users, and for there to be network effects around the protocol. We're happy for other people to build front ends for Self. And in fact, we're actually actively building a wallet SDK that would enable wallets to embed Self protocol into their wallet, so that you can generate proofs for Self directly from these wallets. And in fact, we have a bunch of wallets that we're working with that are already actively integrating this. And so expect some announcements there as well. But the goal really is for Self to be a public good for all of Ethereum. The registry will live on Celo, but now that Celo is an L2, that means it can be trustlessly read across all of Ethereum. And And we think that solving identity for all of Web3 is just so important, and we want to do it in a way that is not siloed, but one that benefits all of the whole ecosystem.
100%. And speaking of, more broadly Web3 and Ethereum as well, do you see, there's a lot of innovation happening on the L2 side. There's also on the app layer different innovations that as time and technology goes forward, more of it will be, created. And I'm wondering, being an L2 yourself now, Celo, do you see the innovation on the app layer coming more on the L2s and Ethereum slowly becoming, more of like the settlement layer? Or do you also think that, innovation and apps can thrive on L1 as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think obviously we're biased. We're working on L2, and we joined Ethereum as an L2, and so I do think that it just makes a lot more sense to build apps on L2s these days. I think eventually all L2s will reach stage 2. Hubert will have a box full of watches celebrating each of these major upgrades. And, at that point, there'll be no security reason not to build on L2s. And you get all the, better features, the faster block times, the cheaper transaction fees. And so, obviously we're not there yet, but I do think that world is coming. And I think earlier in the year, there was also a bunch of doom and gloom about, Ethereum's token economics and whether or not the focus on the LT-centric roadmap was ultimately bad for the value of ETH. I think ETH is now at an all-time high. L2s continue to thrive. In fact, you could argue that some of the value, some of the reason why ETH has gone up is because we've had more fintech and institutional players entering crypto and announcing L2s. Obviously with Robinhood being the biggest example of this lately. And so I think I have a lot of conviction that the L2-centric roadmap is the right direction for Ethereum, and that ultimately Ethereum will become the settlement layer of the internet, and the network effects that it will capture in doing so will accrue so much value that will be in excess of anything that it can get by being a place for transacting on for end users. So yeah, I'm very much in the camp of everyone should build on L2s. Ethereum will just accrue a ton of value from capturing those network effects. And I think it's doing it. And I think, the recent successes are a testament that this is the right path.
I mean, to that.
Yeah. And so would you say there is like any value right now for anybody to launch their own L1 instead of L2 like you guys did? Or what is your take?
I think it's a strange choice in this day and age, especially if you're launching an EVM chain, right? If you're launching an EVM chain, to launch it as an L1 feels
Cash grab.
It just feels like you're creating more work for yourself, because eventually you're going to want to transition that to an L2, right? Like when we launched Celo, and when I say we, the actual Celo validators that came together and mined the first block without ultimately our involvement, there was no L2-centric roadmap, and so there was no alternative way to kind of stand up an EVM chain. And bootstrapping that ecosystem of decentralized validators that could, work together and agree on a new Genesis block and and ultimately secure a network. That took a lot of effort and took a lot of time. And, I just don't see why anyone would want to go through all of that when you don't need to anymore. You can launch as an L2. And critically, by doing so, you also benefit from all the network effects that Ethereum brings. So you do more work and you get less for it. It just doesn't make sense.
So if you were to go back in 2020 when you launched, knowing what you know now about the ecosystem, because I get that things were different back then, would it be safe to say that you would launch directly an L2, or would you still go through an L2?
And back then there were no L2s, so maybe if we just modify the question and say if we were launching Celo, say, in 2023 when we made our governance proposal, the answer is yes, of course we would have launched as an L2.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, we are nearing the top of the hour and the end of the podcast. But before we go, I want to learn what the future holds for Celo. Are there any specific things that you're excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited about Self. I do think that having a scalable, production ready. I didn't mention this before, but Self is fully audited. It's production ready. It's literally the only production ready ZK Passport protocol out there, which is in large part why a lot of these big names that I mentioned are using us. I'm very excited for where this goes, and critically the impact that it will have on crypto. I think to be able to onboard people with incentives without risk of getting Sybil attacked, I think that will just usher a new wave of users and a new wave of use cases that I think are just very, very exciting. So I'm very, very much looking forward to where crypto goes with through the help of things like Self protocol. I'm also just very, very excited for seeing MiniPay continue to grow. They 9 million users is no small feat for a Web3 product, and they got there in a little over a year. And they have all of their remaining 500 million minus 9 million users that they can market to onboard them into this product. I can't wait personally for a day when we go, do you remember when we lived in a world where we didn't have global Venmo, right? A world where we couldn't just send value to anyone in the world, regardless of whether they were, crypto native or not. We take it for granted that you can send a message with WhatsApp to anyone in the world, because 20 years ago you couldn't, right? It just wasn't really possible. And yet now the world we live in, the idea even that wasn't possible just feels absurd. And there will come a turning point when the idea of living in a world where you can't send money to someone anywhere in the world just with no friction using your phone and basically no fees, and have it arrive instantly and have it be received by anyone, even if they're not crypto native, even if they're a normie. The idea that there was a world before that was possible will feel again absurd to people in the future. And so I'm just really excited for that future to arrive. And I really think MiniPay is in the pole position to be the platform by which people do that. And so I'm really, really excited about that. And then beyond that, I think, we're excited for the roadmap for Celo. I think we mentioned working with Succinct. We're bringing that to our mainnet. And I'm very, very bullish on L2s being able to compose with each other through real-time proofs and shared sequencing. And so we're doing a lot of stuff on that front. I'm very, very excited for this future, and just very excited for where the Celo ecosystem goes next.
And in the shorter term, are there any news, launches, events announcements, anything that we should keep our eyes on?
I really like the other one, to be honest. So
Yeah, that's a bit of tea, although by the time that this is edited and put out, this will probably be already out. But later today, Aave will make this announcement. Pretty stoked about that. Yeah, I mentioned a bunch of wallets are actively integrating with Self right now, and so I think keep an eye out for some of those announcements. And then we do have an upcoming hard fork that it's kind of the ice cream hard fork that's going to land in September for Celo. That's when we're upgrading to EigenDA v2. And so that's an exciting thing. It used to be that hard forks were these big like announcements for us, and we would be like shilling them like hell. But this is the third hard fork of the year for Celo. The velocity of the team has been just through the roof. With the L1 to L2 hard fork, with the hard fork that brought Pectra changes to Celo, and now with this EigenDA v2 upgrade. And we're not done yet. We'll likely hard fork before the end of the year to add succinct as well. So just a lot of big hard forks in the works. Yeah, lots of exciting things. And then on the conference scene, I'm going to be at ETH Warsaw next week, at Token later this year, and then of course at DevConnect, and we'll have team members, at all the other major conferences from Korea Blockchain Week through to Binance Blockchain Week as well. So yeah, definitely come find us at all of these events. We're just excited to keep building with you all.
And if you had to make any call to action to our viewers that you knew for sure that they would act on, what would that be to get them more excited and Celo pilled, if you like?
Yeah, definitely install MiniPay and try it out with your family, with kind of your normie friends who are wondering what crypto is good for. MiniPay is just such a lovely experience for normies. So definitely install it. Definitely check it out. And then if you are curious about ZK identity, then definitely check out Self. You can find it at self.xyz. It's a really nice experience. If you have a biometric passport, you can start generating these proofs, and you'll be able to use them to get boosted rewards on Aave soon. So definitely worth trying that out.
Awesome. Well, we'll have all the necessary links in the video description as well for everyone who wants to try it. And I think that brings us to the end of the conversation. So, Marek, thank you so much for being here and taking the time to walk us through Celo and everything that you've been working on and you will be working on in the future as well.
It was great.
Yeah, Hubert, thank you so much for co-hosting as well. And to everyone tuning in, thank you so much for listening.